looking at this piecewise function up here, it actually gives you 3 parts to the function. It says your first part of the function is x plus 2, but you're only going to keep that function if your x's are less than -1. So what they went and did here was they went and graphed that line. This is a line that starts up at 2, so they went up at 2, and then they followed their slope, which was up 1 over 1. So up 2, and then up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. They drew that entire line. But then what they kind of did over here was they drew a box around the area of the line they were going to keep, because they only get to keep the part of the line where their x's are less than -1. Their x's are -1 right here. Less than would be in that direction. Do you guys agree with me on that? So they know that we are not keeping this part of the graph. We're only keeping the part that they kind of boxed off. Does that make sense to everybody? Then they went and they graphed the second equation. The second equation would be y equals 1. So they came over here and they graphed the line y equals 1, which is a horizontal line. And then they looked at the restrictions. It says keep that line only if your x values are between -1 and +1. So they went to -1, they went to +1, and they kind of boxed that off. So the only part of the graph they're going to keep is that part that's inside their little box. You guys following me on what they're doing here? Then they went and graphed the third one. The third one is a parabola. It doesn't move left or right or up or down, so they started at 0, 0. They went over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3 in both directions. They graphed their parabola, but then they looked at the restrictions. The restriction says x has to be greater than 1. So they went and they found where x was 1, and they made a box in the greater than direction. Then what they show you that they did was they just cut out their box on each one of these, and they pieced the graph back together. Okay, so when they did that, the piece that they kept from graph 1 looked like this, the piece that they kept from graph 2 looked like this, and the piece that they grabbed from graph 3 looked like this, and when they pieced it back together, it looks like this. This is what a piecewise function is. So you're graphing more than one function, but only keeping a piece of it. Does that kind of make sense to everybody? So we're going to do the same thing ourselves, but we're not going to try to like cut it out or anything. We're just going to graph it and keep the part of our function that we're supposed to be keeping. So if you guys look at this function right here, can you tell me what kind of a graph it's going to look like? What does the 1 squared term tell you? Yep, you're drawing it for me in the air. I love it. It's a parabola, right? It's a smiley face or a frowny face. This is a parabola. This parabola right here tells me to start where? How far left or how far right? What is that, right. +1? It's which way? Right. Yeah, left 1. And then what does the +2 say? Yeah, so left 1, up 2. So I go left 1, I go up 2, and I'm going to graph my parabola. There was not a pattern change on this parabola, so I follow my original pattern, which is over 1, up 1 in both directions, then over 1, up 3. And if I wanted to go again, I go over 1, up 5. Now I want you guys to notice that I'm really just graphing this really light right now because I know I'm going to have to erase part of it. So in just a minute, I'll make it darker so that you guys can see it. But you guys agree that that's where my parabola should be? Yeah? Okay. I have restrictions here that tells me I can only keep my parabola where my x values are less than or equal to 4. So on your x-axis, will you find 4 for me? It's like clear over here, right? So I would just kind of decide where my graph is at, and actually I would be over 1, up. I would be clear up here still, right? So I actually get to keep everything from 4 to the left. So I actually get to keep pretty much my graph, right? Until it comes over here and it, oh, that was bad. Raw. Till it touches over here at 4. Do you guys agree with me on that? It's going to keep going in this direction where it touches over here at 4. Is it going to be a solid or a dotted line? Or a solid or a dotted dot? So, what am I saying? Open or closed dot? Open. Is it open or closed? The equals tells you it has to be closed. So you would find that spot that would be 4, you would close it, and everything that's to the right of that would not be used anymore. So I'm really keeping most of my parabola here on this one. And then I have a second part of my graph to graph. So this would be y equals 6 if x is greater than 4. So y equals 6 is up 6 on the x-axis or the y-axis. I would draw my horizontal line through that point because y equals 6. But I'm only going to keep that line where my x values are greater than 4. Well, my x value is 4 right here. Because it said greater than and not equal to, I'm just going to have an open circle there. And which direction are my x values greater than 4? To the right or to the left? To the right. So I'm going to graph this to the right. And every other part of that graph that I had drawn, I'm going to erase because it cannot be part of my answer. So my answer on this graph is this part of the parabola and this part of the line. Remembering again that this was an open circle here on this one because it was not equal to. This was a closed circle because it was equal to. Okay, this is what a piecewise function looks like. You draw pieces of the graphs. Okay. All right, let's try the last one that is on our note-taking guide today. So what kind of a graph is the absolute value of x plus 2? What's it going to look like? It's a V-shaped graph. Good. And where does it start at? Up 2, right? Because of the plus 2. Anybody remember the pattern that a V-shaped graph follows? Yeah, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, right? So again, I'm going to graph this really light because I know I'm not going to keep it all, and then I'll kind of color in it darker the part that I'm going to keep. But this is where my graph is at. This is what it would look like. But I only am going to keep my graph where my x's are less than 0. So go on the x-axis to 0, and you're going to keep it where your x's are less than 0. Do your x's go less than to the right or to the left of 0? To the left, right? So right here, there was no equal sign, so it's got to be an open circle right here at 0, and I'm keeping the part of my graph that goes to the left. So I'm keeping this part over here. What am I doing with this part of my absolute value graph? Yeah, I'm getting rid of it. Okay? So questions on how I found that part of my piecewise function? All right, next part then is 2x minus 3. Anybody know what 2x minus 3 is going to look like when we graph it? It's a line, right? Where do I start out on my line? I start down at -3. And then I follow my slope, which would be up 2 and over 1. So up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. I'm going to draw this line really light because I don't keep all of it. And then I'll just darken in the part that I'm going to keep. I'm going to keep this line between 0 and 6. At 0, it's going to be solid. At 6, it's going to be open. Okay? So 0 is right here. 6 is right here. And I'm keeping everything in between 0 and 6. What am I doing with the rest of it? Yep, delete it. Get rid of it, erase it, whatever you need to do. So far, this is my answer. You guys following me on where I got that from? All right, one last one then. This says y equals -4. So I go on the y-axis to -4. And I would have a horizontal line through that spot. So again, I graph that really light because I know I'm going to only keep part of it. Okay, here's my horizontal line. I only keep that horizontal line where my x's are greater than or equal to 6. So I go on the x-axis to 6. I find that spot on my line. Is it going to be a solid dot or an open dot right there? It's solid, good, because of the equal to sign right here. And then I'm keeping everything that's greater than that, so I'm keeping it to the right, which means what do I do with everything to the left? Yeah, I delete it. I erase it all. Okay. So this graph right here is what's represented by this piecewise function. So like on the bell work today, if I said find f of 10, if you went over to 10 on your graph, which is right here, what would your answer be? -4. So that's what we did without graphing the graph to see where the actual values were. We came up here and we're like, oh, it goes in this bottom function. My answer has to be -4. So now we're just doing the visualization of what we did last week on the other note-taking guide. Okay.